So welcome everybody to the Grow with the Flow podcast powered by Chargeflow. I am your host, Dove Karp, with my main man, Dave Silverman. We are on a quest to speak with the brightest minds in e-commerce to learn how to take our brands to the next level by listening to fascinating personal stories of wins and losses, as well as specific strategies and tactics that help generate tens of millions of dollars or more for some of the biggest brands in the world. Now, today, I am very happy to host Dr. Jonathan Snow. Are we going by John or Jonathan? What would you prefer?
Either one is fine. I would say in writing, Jonathan, but when we're in convo, John is good.
Okay, we're going to go with the John here. Okay, so Dr. John Snow is the Chief Innovation Officer at Avenue Z and President and Founder of the Snow Agency, a prominent digital marketing agency and leading Shopify Plus partner, recently named the #2 fastest growing advertising and marketing company in the U.S. by Inc. 5000. He holds various roles, including CIO, founder, orthodontist, affiliate marketing platform builder, and strategic advisor to multiple e-commerce brands, MarTech firms, and Revere Partners, the world's only oral health VC fund. An expert in all things D2C and e-commerce from the ground up, he shares weekly firsthand insights on LinkedIn, Twitter, and his newsletter, In the Snow. John, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. I have to say that was probably the best intro I've ever heard on myself. I don't even need to intro myself anymore. You covered it.
Well, we try to do what we can over here. You know what I mean? Okay, so we're going to get right into it, right? So in a little bit of digging, we noticed that you actually were the general dentist and a captain in the U.S. Air Force for 3 years. I wanted to know, one, how that came about, and two, what were some of the most impactful moments that you experienced doing that?
Yeah. So when I was getting into dental school, first year in dental school, found out that there was this program essentially to serve in the Air Force or serve in the Navy or Army as a dentist once you graduated dental school. And they would essentially pay one for one. Essentially, each year that you would serve as a dentist after dental school, they would pay for 1 year of education. And they would give you a nice living stipend and everything like that during dental school. So obviously that was extremely appealing, but also I had always had the desire to serve my country too. Like my dad has been working for the Navy as a civilian for close to 40 years now. And so I always had a connection to the armed forces and thought this would be the perfect opportunity to kind of serve the country, and also a great financial decision as well. And I heard that practicing in the armed forces was also just a great hands-on experience too. So that's kind of how that came to be. So I went through officer training school, like after dental school was done, went to essentially, it was like 40 days of boot camp in Alabama, and, did the typical boot camp that normal people do. So it was a great experience.
That's awesome. Very cool. So to build on that, so you became, I believe, an orthodontist, correct?
Yep.
So
yeah, after my time in the Air Force, so it was always my dream to become an orthodontist. That's why I went to dental school. I never actually wanted to become a general dentist, but during this armed forces service program, they didn't want you to continue education for another 3 years. They wanted you to essentially graduate and serve your time as a dentist. So after those 3 years, applied to my ortho residency, got out of the Air Force, got into Maimonides Medical Center orthodontic residency program in Brooklyn, New York. So I moved back and then kind of lived out the orthodontic career as well.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so I also noticed that you kind of just, it seems like you started digital marketing as a hobby, because I'm trying to picture how this all-star of marketing went from, an orthodontist, the doctor, and then all of a sudden it seems like one is very academic and that type of thing. The other one is much more in the world of business. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so it was actually thanks to my time in the Air Force. So when I moved down to Louisiana, which is where I was stationed, in the middle of nowhere in Shreveport, Louisiana. This is not New Orleans or any big city. It's literally in the middle of nowhere. Northwest Louisiana, right on the border of Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma. Anyways, I moved down there. I was not married yet, single guy living out there, knew nobody, obviously, in the middle of nowhere, Louisiana, had nothing to do after work. So the days would start in the Air Force. You would start at 7 a.m., you'd end at 3 p.m., and then I would have literally nothing to do when I got home. And during that time, my brother, Dan, who had been my partner for the past 10 plus years on all things business. He was building these large Instagram pages. So an example of his biggest page today is @Wrap on Instagram. Over 12 million followers on Instagram, tens of millions of followers across TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, etc. And so he had this idea. This is back in 2014. He had this idea like, hey, I have all these pages with millions and millions of followers, and there's a lot of other pages out there just like mine. Why is no one monetizing their pages, right? So he's like, do you want to essentially build this platform that would get organic pages on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook? So that means influencers, athletes, other niche-based pages like @Wrap, and there's other meme pages, things like that. We'd get them on this platform. We would find essentially like e-commerce offers and essentially middleman this whole network. It's essentially built out an affiliate network leveraging organic social pages. So I said, sure, why not? I don't know anything about social. I don't even use Instagram myself, but sounds interesting. Sounds like there's a lot of potential. I saw kind of this when Instagram influencers first started rising a decade ago. And I just saw that's where kind of a lot of energy was going. So started just playing around with, doing this kind of stuff, buying shout outs on influencer pages, and obviously then started scaling out the platform, ended up onboarding over 10,000 pages on Instagram onto our platform. We're generating 9 figures in revenue, of affiliate revenue within 2 years of launching that platform. And it just got deeper and deeper and deeper into it. So
what
that was
year
my start.
is this? What
This
are we
is
talking
2014.
about?
So 2014 to 2016, you went from basically 0 in revenue to 9 figures?
9 figures in revenue. That wasn't this is revenue driven through the platform. We took, whatever the CPA was, we would take usually like a 10% rake. We would middleman it. So like if we're paying influencers out 45, the brand was paying us 50 and we kept 5, something like that. And so,
okay.
Yep. And so, so we scaled it up really quickly. I was doing this on the side just to play around with it. And then obviously I ended up managing every single influencer account. And we were responsible for building out the landing pages for the offers and everything like that. And just got deeper and deeper. Then we started launching our own e-commerce brands, leveraging that network we had built out. And so that's how we got into the e-com side. So started launching a new brand every quarter. And I was basically working around the clock. So like even in between patients, hopefully the Air Force isn't listening. In between patients, I was literally like buying shout outs, talking to influencers, managing teams, doing this. Then I'm going to my next patient. So I was really living like a double life, 2 different careers simultaneously for many years. Yeah, exactly. And so and when you strike something while the iron is hot and you're just like printing cash and success is just everywhere around you, that you're like, you're on a race against the clock because, other people are going to start competing soon. So it's like, I was literally working around the clock, not even wanting to go to sleep because I knew that we were onto something very early.
At that time, did you envision leaving dentistry? Like at what point did that happen? Because we're going to go into the specifics because I really want to go deeper into the influencer marketing. But right now, like when did you decide to make that leap?
Yeah, so it definitely didn't even cross my mind while I was in the Air Force because once again, like I said, I literally went to dental school to become an orthodontist, which is extremely challenging to do. Had to finish top 5 in my dental class, had to get like top 1 percentile on the boards, had to do all this stuff essentially to become an orthodontist. And it was still the biggest passion of mine. So I wasn't ready to leave until I at least saw that through. So like I finished up the 3 years as a dentist in the Air Force. Then I was in orthodontic residency. And obviously at that point now I had several e-commerce brands in addition to that affiliate network. All these brands were successful, at least 7 figures in annual revenue profitably, bootstrapped all of them. And then the thought started creeping into my mind, like if I, and I always wanted to be a business owner on the ortho side, I wasn't going to go work for someone. So that was never even in my mind. And then we launched the agency while I was still in orthodontic residency. But as we neared the end there, so it was always I started, I had nice cash flow and everything. I was going to go buy an orthodontic practice, but hire an orthodontist to work like 90% of the time. I would treat patients maybe, 1 day a week. So I actually I was under attorney review, already had a signed agreement to buy a practice in the Bronx, and COVID hit that week while we were in due diligence. And so
Wow.
During that time, obviously, I pulled out of that deal. Everything shut down in New York City during COVID. You could not perform any type of elective treatment, doctor or dentist. And orthodontics is purely elective treatment. Like, it's just you're straightening people's teeth. It's not really emergency treatment. So, I mean, that office shut down for like a few months.
Wow.
And so obviously I pulled out of that deal. Agency launched September 2019. So I just focused all my time during those next 3 or 4 months during COVID on building out the agency more. And by the time things opened back up, honestly, I just didn't go back to dentistry. That was the last time I treated a patient was COVID. So that was, it kind of made my decision for me. And I'm pretty thankful because scaling out an agency, you're scaling humans and you're scaling clients, there's not enough time in the day to even deal with the agency full time, let alone run a business simultaneously in a totally different, industry.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. It's what's amazing is that, in life, you kind of choose your path. Like if you go back a little bit and you'll be like, I'm going to be an orthodontist. That's what I'm going to do. All of a sudden your brother's like, hey, you want to help me with this? All right, whatever. Fine. I'll help it out. And then all of a sudden the blessing kind of comes in a completely different way. It's not like you weren't going to do some pretty solid things as an orthodontist too, but it's just amazing that like you found something that kind of fell in your lap a little bit and exploded and you just took advantage of that opportunity.
Exactly. I would say that like the most important thing is to always have an open mind. Like I'm a pretty stubborn person, but when I identify opportunity and I introspect and I kind of looked at the opportunity at hand, like what's the North Star? If I was, crazy successful orthodontist and opened a ton of practices and built out practices over the next 20 to 30 years, how much enterprise value would that bring versus like I built out all these brands and agency over the next X amount of years? Would that be a potentially bigger exit? And what am I most passionate about? Like what do I wake up in the morning more excited to do? Obviously, dental career, I love doing it, but it felt like work, right? Doing this e-commerce and digital marketing thing feels like a video game to me. It feels like a hobby still. It really does. Like, and when you match passion with opportunity, I just saw like the writing was on the wall, like more passionate about what I'm building on the e-com side. And honestly, it has higher upside. It was a no-brainer when I kind of made that decision. But if it wasn't for COVID, I probably would have been doing both simultaneously. Probably would have kept the practice, not practice anymore, but just would have had another headache. I'm at the point now where I'm trying to eliminate headaches in my life, not add more in. Just because if you want to do something really well, I truly believe you have to go all in on it. Like when you spread yourself too thin, that's where you're kind of treading water on all of these things.
It sounds like you came across the whole timing perfectly, right? So you're running in parallel dental school, which you have is de-risked currently because they're going to pay for it. In parallel, you're starting an e-commerce brand and marketing that's blowing up. And then you have the perfect storm and COVID hits, which is when e-commerce really blows up.
Yep.
So at that stage, it sounded that you're like, why would I go back to orthodontist? Why would I go back to that? And not saying that in the future you wouldn't, because right now that things are running at a certain pace, have you ever thought about going back and opening up your orthodontist practice as an industry, right? You said you want to buy out places and put someone in place over there to manage.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there with like the timing and just kind of riding the wave, seeing where the industry and just the economy is taking you, which like I said, like I'm all about opportunity and having an open mind. So I'm thankful that wasn't easy decisions to make. But in terms of going back, I do kind of miss the patient care side of things. I mean, when you work like over 30 years of your life dedicating to like just building out a craft, I became a specialist. I published research in the American Board of Orthodontics journal. So I had all these accomplishments, so much energy and time went into studying and being able to go back and do that would be, I think it's definitely like it's crossed my mind, but I don't think it's the right move. It'd almost be to feed my ego, I would say, in a sense. Because like, what am I actually like? What kind of impact am I going to make by just going back and treating a patient once a day? Maybe getting into the business side of things. It definitely has crossed my mind. Not while I'm still full time on the agency. There's no way I would have time to truly dedicate to both. So I'm pretty honest with myself about that. Maybe like, in a future day, I would get into it again, but I'll be honest, it's not an easy business right now. Private equity came into orthodontics and dentistry as a whole. They drove down prices, trying to undercut, the small mom and pop shops on the side. And so it's kind of been a race to the bottom in the dental world. And you're competing with private equity, who's just like, if you want to compete on the margin game, like you simply can't there and do great work. So, and another thing to think about when you're building orthodontic practices, we're thinking about customer lifetime value. How long are customers, your patients, in braces for? Anywhere from 1 to 3 years max. So you're constantly acquiring new customers, and it's like you're limited. Your scale potential is severely limited by the number of chairs you have in your practice, right? So it's like, and how many hands you have working and treating these. So the scale, the limitations, and like the enterprise value obviously suffers on these practices because you're not building like a patient base that's staying with you over time, right? Like you're constantly burning through new patients, in and out of braces. So like a very successful orthodontic practice would go for anywhere from like $1 to $2 million, and you've spent 20 years building that. You could do that on the internet, build a 7-figure business that you flip in less than a year on the internet. So it's like, what I'm thinking about as a businessman is like my time better spent doing like, roll-ups of ortho practices or just building internet businesses. I would say it's probably the internet businesses.
100%. All right. So let's get back to the influencers, right? I want to know, how did you determine who the right influencers would be for the campaign, and how did you recruit them? We're going to have a couple of questions to kind of go down this line, but I want to get more into specifics. If you can give
back when I built this platform.
Yeah,
very easy actually. So acquired every single influencer we could find on Instagram, and obviously they had a niche, right? So we very quickly learned that.
Pause. Define influencer. Define
anyone,
industry.
I would say anyone that had like over 10,000 followers on Instagram was like on our list to acquire for this platform.
How many of those were there in 2014?
Oh, I mean, we had at least 10,000 that we acquired. So yeah, I mean, there was a good amount, and a lot of these influencers were appearing out of nowhere. Like you would have someone go from no followers to 100,000 followers within a couple months. Back then, there were like a ton of these so influencers would also promote each other and kind of build influencer networks within themselves. They all had the same manager, essentially. They were all shouting out each other to grow kind of artificially that way. And so like there were just big influencer pages springing up out of nowhere. But we very quickly learned how to kind of understand the niche, right? Like all female influencers did not have female followers, right? If they were generally an attractive female influencer, it was mostly males following them. So you don't want to push like women's, hair growth supplements, right? Like that might be better suited for like a mom influencer, not someone that's trying to gain followers based on their looks, right? So
it's like, here's my power drill. Who likes it?
Exactly. That's right. So they would push like casino offer, like online casino offers, or like hair growth supplements, and they would take the angle of like, shopping for her boyfriend, or like, I like men who have a full head of hair or whatever, if we're pushing like a hair growth or beard growth supplement or a full beard, So we started identifying and like tagging all the influencers, what niche they were in. And because everything was UTM based and every like call to action.
Can you explain UTM?
Yeah, just a tracking link. So like every influencer had their own unique tracking link for the offer. Okay. They would put it in their bio on Instagram. So like we essentially, because this was all UTM based and everything was being tracked within our platform and our portal, we knew exactly how much revenue every single influencer on Instagram could drive, essentially, for certain offers. So now we had like literally the cheat code to launch our own brands. If we were launching, let's say like a beard growth supplement, we never did actually, but if we did, we would know exactly which influencers to go to. And then we would arbitrage. We would pay them for a shout. Actually, if we knew that, let's say they would drive $1,000 on a 24-hour post, we would try to negotiate a package of, 10 posts for $1,000 and things like that. So we were able to, like, influencers didn't even know how much essentially their pages were worth for a couple of years, but we did. So it was like a big arbitrage opportunity for us.
Is this platform still around?
No. So we actually shut it down back in 2016 because Instagram changed the algorithm to limit reach on influencer pages whenever there was a clear advertisement placed on it, and it wasn't coming from the ad platform.
there are many businesses, or more correctly, agencies that are influencer marketing agencies on Instagram.
Correct. That's for UGC, not to generate revenue generally. But that model is essentially flipped on its head now because of TikTok Shop and the affiliate. So that has come full circle. And now the way that we're approaching influencer is very much like I was approaching it 10 years ago, and trying to acquire TikTok Shop affiliates. Anyone that we find, as an influencer, we would rather them become a TikTok Shop affiliate, and just kind of go back to the old days of doing things. So sorry, go ahead. Yeah, influencers on TikTok are going viral. I made a post like a month ago, three TikTok Shop influencers with 5,000 followers that generated like millions in revenue so far.
Wow.
So how do they do that? If you could dig in a second to what TikTok Shop is doing with UGC and explain that to our listeners.
Yep. So I'll actually take it back to the Instagram thing. So back in the day with Instagram, if you had 10 million followers and you posted a clear ad on your page, you'd get full reach. You would get, anytime those followers would open up their page, they would likely see that, even though it was an ad. And Instagram realized that, people were essentially skirting around the ad platform by going directly to, these pages, and they weren't getting a cut on the ad platform essentially. So that's why they nuked it. And in 2016, they essentially had the ability to scan every post if it had a call to action, like click the link in my bio, or any type of like clear product featured in it. They would nuke the reach by like 90%. So if you had 10 million followers, maybe sometimes you'd get 1 million views, sometimes you'd get 50,000 views, sometimes you'd get a few million, but you couldn't really scale predictably anymore. So that was the old way, and how Instagram actually still is today. TikTok Shop is actually the opposite. So you're not limited by reach. If you have 5,000 followers on TikTok and you're a TikTok Shop affiliate, you could get 5 million views, 50 million views on your videos. You could produce millions in revenue, even though you don't have the follower base to support it. They want to create this like FOMO environment and have this limitless organic scale, so that other creators want to build on the platform. So other brands want to start investing on, building on the platform because of that like virality feature. And Instagram actually has now changed with Reels. Now they're like, I actually posted about this also like a month ago. The founder of Instagram, and Adam Mosseri, he said that if you're posting a Reel, you're not limited by your follower count, so you can get endless reach. So they're now following TikTok.
So I'm listening to Gary Vaynerchuk's a new book, at least the audio version, Day Trading Attention, and he's bringing this exact thing where he's talking about it's really based off of the quality of content that you put out. And these platforms are now incentivized to push it as much as possible. And so for him, he's talking about, for the influencers or striving influencers, you never know. Like you can have 200 people who are following you, and all of a sudden you put out a really great piece of content. The platform itself is going to push it. So TikTok's been doing that, and you're saying that Instagram now is doing that with Reels.
Yep.
Is that also the same case with like with Facebook and YouTube and all the other kind of platforms? And is it specifically with these kind of more short form content?
It's all Facebook Reels is essentially the same algorithm, I'd say, emphasis as Instagram Reels. And then there's YouTube Shorts, same thing, this viral component of the short form content. These platforms realize like they need daily active users. The more time people are spending on the platform, the more they're going to be able to place ads, right? So they want to start rewarding creators that are increasing, like the experience for other users on the platform. And that's why they're going to be pushing this type of content. So that's kind of how it's approached.
I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he was telling me that TikTok currently has within their ads marketplace an area that the influencers can go in and the companies go in, and each one says what they offer. And the company will say, we're looking for this kind of influencer whose followers are from X demographic. And the influencer could then go in, make a few sample UGC videos, and they can be bid on by the companies to say, we want to use that. Are you familiar with such a platform for UGC?
So I'm not familiar with anything like that. We use Incense for influencers to kind of like put out a content brief and have influencers or affiliates apply to work with the brand based on all the criteria we're looking for, whether it's demographic, follower count, niche, all that good stuff. But then on TikTok Shop, they have an incredible affiliate marketplace. It's called Target Collaborations. You can go through their entire affiliate database and filter out influencers that meet your certain criteria, like age range, follower count, even GMV that they've driven, engagement rates. The list goes on with how you're able to identify them, and you can send them direct messages. You can message up to like 100 influencers at a time on TikTok Shop, just through their affiliate marketplace alone.
So let's get a little bit more into the specifics. When you are going with an influencer, what is that, I guess, agreement typically look like? How many posts or what type of posts? How often the platform? Do you provide what it is? Or do you just say you do it yourself? I want to know more about that aspect.
Right. So there's actually two different, let's think about influencers totally separate from affiliates.
Okay.
Like affiliates are influencers, but influencers are not always affiliates. So influencers requires you to pay them up front, essentially, right? So like you have a contract with them. You're like, here's the content brief. Here are the talking points. I want, full control over quality. So like if you shoot the video and it's not what I'm looking for, you need to reshoot it, right? I want full usage rights. I want whitelisting access on Facebook or Spark code access on TikTok. You're essentially negotiating
whitelisting and Spark code. Can you just
so Spark codes are essentially like on TikTok. If they post on TikTok, if you want Spark code access, that means they're giving you essentially the access to amplify their organic post with your own paid media dollars. So it's like it'll be paid media that appears to be coming from like the influencer's page. Right.
Wait, and it's not like a sponsored post?
It is, but it's sponsored.
Does it say sponsored?
It will say sponsored. I mean, very discreetly, but yeah. So, and then whitelisting is essentially the same exact thing, but on the meta side. So on Facebook and Instagram, you can run any ad coming directly from the influencer's page rather than the brand page. Or you could run it as a partnership ad where it'll say the influencer's name with the brand. I'm sure you've seen that before. So that's a partnership ad. But essentially all these things are negotiated and agreed to up front in exchange for a payment up front.
And they're like, typically when it comes to the bigger influencers or whatever, it's a flat payment. Like this is going to be $5,000 or 50 or 100 or $1 million, whatever it is. And then it'll say X amount of posts or maybe one post, depending on
whatever the brand is looking for, like like what we do, like we usually say 1 or 2 posts plus the raw footage. So if we want to chop it up in any other way that we want, include it in other videos, we always want the raw footage too. And if we have like 2 different angles we want to test, maybe we'll bundle it where we want them to do 2 different pieces of UGC, one hitting on a different angle. So that's kind of like how we package it. But the affiliate side is totally different. And that's what's really exciting to me right now and where I think the market is going. There's no payment up front, right? So it's a commission rate. So it's performance only. So I always tell brands to offer as much commission as you reasonably can while still being profitable on the first purchase. Easy way to approach that is I ask brands like, what is your return on ad spend goal on Facebook or TikTok? Usually they'll tell me like a 2X I'm happy with, a 3X I'm happy with. I say, okay, that's your acquisition cost. You should be offering your commission at the same level as your acquisition cost that you're happy with. So, like a 30% commission is equivalent to like a 3.3 return on ad spend. Sounds like a lot, 30% commission, but when you put it in perspective, if that's your acquisition cost of a customer, you should be able to scale that all day. If you're happy with a 2X, why aren't you offering 50% commission to your affiliates? Because now they're more incentivized to not just post once, but keep posting, right? They win, you win. And I mean, that's kind of how I frame it to them.
Do people typically, I guess, filter out? Because I mean, I'm just thinking from a business side. If people could come into the brand, hey, I'd love to be an affiliate. Like for example, Russell Brunson and ClickFunnels, right? ClickFunnels had a whole entire kind of affiliate thing. It seemed like whoever wants to just promote it, go ahead. Whereas I assume other brands probably there's a bit more, red tape to go through to be accepted as an affiliate. Yeah.
Yep. So it's 2 different things, right? Like the brands that are in it for like brand awareness, they want brand ambassadors. They don't really care about like direct ROI or performance. They just want like impressions and like brand awareness for this person that aligns perfectly with my brand. And like, you know, they don't even need to measure what the halo effects are on other channels. Like those influencers probably better for them. I would say 99.9% of D2C brands do not fit that. And they're more after like, we want an ROI on pretty much every activity. There's not much brand awareness dollars, you know, at play here. Those need to focus on affiliate channels, because now also, when think about attribution too, if on TikTok Shop, you know, if the impression and the conversion are all happening within TikTok, it's a one-to-one conversion, you know, attribution is no longer a concern. A big concern back like in the days of UTMs, obviously attribution. If the people are clicking through the link, they don't buy right then and there, maybe they go on a different device later and then purchase whatever. It was never trackable. So like now with this closed loop ecosystem, attribution is clear. Like you're only paying for performance. It's a guaranteed scalable channel, because if you're setting your own acquisition costs, like you would scale that endlessly, right? So, and on the back end, that's where because like a lot of brands are like, oh, we love influencer because like we wanted usage rights on that content to then run on our Facebook ads, and we wanted to put these influencers on our landing page. We're getting usage rights for our affiliates, like on roughly 50% of the people that post. They're allowing us to use their content, and we have like a content management system that tracks usage rights on all affiliate content, and you can send those requests, you know, through this platform. You can incentivize affiliates like, hey, I'll give you a $20 Visa gift card if you give me usage rights, or I'll give you a $50 store credit to, you know, whatever it may be. And essentially the goal is to get as much usage rights as possible from that affiliate content, you know, without having to pay
specifically, is this specifically TikTok has kind of like the one-stop shop right now? Is that in any other platform?
It's not native in TikTok Shop. So I'm going to plug the software we use right now. Refundle is what we use to manage usage rights. So essentially any influencer, affiliate, person, customer, anytime your brand or product is tagged in a post on Instagram stories, TikTok, or they tag the product from your shop in it, like on TikTok Shop, then it gets pulled into this Refundle dashboard. In that dashboard, you now see how many videos you've been tagged in. You could, with one click, request usage rights, and it'll shoot a DM to those influencers to, you know, essentially click this link if they agree to usage rights. Then it essentially tags all the videos that you've been tagged in as usage rights granted or not. It puts everything that the usage rights were granted in a nice folder. So now a paid media team can go into this folder and know exactly what pieces of content they can use in their paid media campaigns. And so like it's creating this creative ecosystem that never had existed before for brands.
That's wild. It's like kind of like the world is their oyster. They're just sitting there, and if they create a good product or whatever, and somebody wants to now these people who are tagging the product, I guess a lot of them they're not being paid for it. There's nothing it's just like, I like this brand, and hey, you should check out this new Louis Vuitton bag or whatever it is. Now all of a sudden that pops up in this platform. What was the name of the platform again? Refundle. So if Refundle gets that, it's like, oh, this is
how much
amazing.
are they paying you to say that, or are they going to run it through their own algorithm afterwards?
Zero. They're paying me zero.
All right. Well, maybe they're going to reach out to us. But then we'll get you in on the deal. All right, John.
Let's do it. Yeah. You should bring the founder on the show next.
Nice. All right. You'll set that up.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. All right. So now there's many different ways of.
Hold on. I want to put a pause over here. It does sound from everything you said now that anybody can get in the game.
Yeah. Yep. Well, affiliates.
Doesn't Gucci want to be a little more exclusive with who's promoting their new lingerie?
Put it this way. This is how the brands that are like, oh, like, first of all, the affiliate, first of all, like, anyone could tag Gucci, any customer put a bad review out there, something that doesn't align with their brand. You know what I mean? Like, that's already happening. So if you're worried about affiliates doing that, like, first of all, affiliates are not going to say anything bad. They're doing this to generate sales, right? So they're going to say something at least neutral. And you're going to have bad actors talking about your brand, whether or not you're embedding yourself in this affiliate ecosystem. So that's kind of how I frame it, right? And like Gucci stuff is appearing next to things they don't want it to appear in all the time. You know, Gucci bags are featured in, cops videos where people are running, someone stole a Gucci bag and they're getting arrested by the police, right? Something that's not just making things up. But You got what I'm saying? So it's like when you're so concerned over the image, like this stuff will happen whether or not you're going into the affiliate game.
Okay, so I have a different question. We mentioned affiliate and we mentioned paid influencers, right? So when you're going after the paid influencer, what's the hack for finding the influencer who's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, who has the good ROI or better than expected ROI, can produce a halo effect afterwards, may eventually be a bigger name? How do you find those?
So what we do, the way we approach influencer for the past decade has been, if you're looking for an influencer, do not pay this, A-list, B-list celebrity a ton of money, and do not value any sales coming from that organic post.
What does that mean? Don't value sales coming from the post?
Do not expect $1 to be generated from that influencer posting on their page.
It's branding. That's basically what you're branding. Saying.
The value of influencer today, I'm talking about influencer, not affiliate right now, is taking that content as UGC and then amplifying it with paid media dollars. Remember what I said before, like Instagram, and they're still doing this, when they see that it's a clear ad for a product, like they're pushing a product, the reach is going to be crap. The engagement is going to be crap. Where that value you're going to get from is going to be launching that as an ad in your Facebook ad platform, or launching it, repurposing that content on TikTok.
So I just want good actors.
So we want micro influencers. Why? Because we don't care about their follower count, because they're not going to get much organic reach anyways. And we want the micro influencers that are going to try hard and create good content that we see on their page, right? So, and they're going to give us whitelisting access too, so we can run it as an ad and buy impressions, because we know it's not going to go viral on its own on Instagram. So there is a ton of value there, right? So like we want to pay anywhere from $100 to $300 for that good piece of content. And we're just considering it as like a creative fee. It's not like they're not influencing anyone to purchase this organically. It's going to be influenced through paid media dollars.
Do you care about who their following demographic is?
Me personally, no. Because once again, like I don't care. Like they're essentially actors. We're hiring actors that produce good short form content that we know can follow like a performance marketing, like creative brief, that we can then run in paid media. And then we're going to be targeting on Facebook ads. So like, we don't care about their follower count. We don't care about who their followers are, unless it's like a brand awareness play. Once again, if you're like, a huge brand that's just looking for more people of like a certain following to be aware, like that's different.
Now it's probably easier to see. Now this is where the question comes from, is that when they create content, there's going to be some pieces of content that perform better, and they're over indexing those pieces of content. And I assume those are the ones that you're gonna be like, okay, most of them are getting 1,500 or 2,000, views, and this one got 27,000. So like, this is probably the one we're going to go with. But the question is that if you're telling me that by them creating that content, the platform is going to de-incentivize, that piece of content, do you still, it's just, although the numbers are lower, you'll still see kind of a bump, and that's the one you go with? Or it's kind of like just the whole field is just messed up?
Are you talking about Instagram right now?
Yeah, I guess.
When you say go with, do you mean like testing in paid media?
Well, it's testing organic media. If they're creating several pieces of content, and then they're putting it on their page, and then you're going to see which one performed best. I assume is the one that you're going to use as paid.
If we're talking about Instagram influencer content when they're posting organically, we test everything on paid from Instagram. Like we don't really, pick and choose which ones we're going to test. We test everything, because honestly, sometimes the ones that you never think will perform end up performing best. Like that's happened so many times over and over again over the past decade that we just let the ad platform and the algo dictate what's going to succeed through paid.
Nice. Okay, so let's switch it up to a more interesting section of the podcast. I want to know, what has been your proudest professional moment so far?
Oh, proudest professional moment. Never actually stopped and thought about that. The first thing that came to mind. The first thing that came to mind just now is actually not even anything on the digital side or like the e-com side. It's getting my research published in the American Journal of Orthodontics. So I'm like the first. It's the most prestigious journal to get published in. It took me, actually, I didn't even get it published until like a year or two ago. So I 3 years of research that I conducted in residency. And yeah, like, I guess 2 years later after that is when it got published. So it was basically a culmination of all of my life's work. Getting published is like a very rigorous process. I'm the only person in the history of my residency program to get published. And so it's a very prestigious and proud moment that I have.
Heck
So
yeah, bro.
So that's interesting you say that, because if we're going to fast forward, let's say 50 years, right? And you're looking back on your career and you built this massive media empire. Is there going to be a part of you that says, you know, I made a lot of money and I did a lot of big things, you know, and I helped a lot of people. But man, I could have been like the top orthodontist in the US or the world, or I could have put out a bunch more research papers.
Right.
You know, I'm just asking you that from the moment that stood out. It wasn't, we made 50 million bucks, or I took, you know, in 2 years, I went 9 figures. It was, I put a lot of work into that research, and it was published.
Yeah. So it's a good question. I mean, so like money, I'm not even doing, you know, everything right now for money anyways. I'm just doing what I'm passionate about, and like what you know, it's like the passion, the opportunity, the intersection of everything that I love doing is what I'm doing at this exact moment. So it's more of like I'm playing a lifelong video game right now that I'm enjoying the journey, every single minute of it. Like I said, if I went back to the dental side, the journey I wouldn't be enjoying as much. Would I have more impact on society? Probably. I'd have thousands of people walking around with, you know, beautiful smiles that I created. But I wouldn't have enjoyed.
They're smiling for other reasons.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't have any regrets whatsoever. And I don't think I will regret it at the end of the day, because you spend 99.9% of your time in the journey. Like, if you're just doing what you love, like, I think that's what brings happiness the most. So like, once again, like if I looked back and I'm like, what did I actually accomplish? It's more of like an ego thing, I think. And so, yeah, and I'm not chasing money at all right now. Yeah. So, and I think that's a dangerous game to get into.
100%. Okay, so let's talk about regrets. What do you think? What's been your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
Biggest failure. That's another really good question. I actually don't know. I would say the biggest failure, like within a business that we had, was on the e-com side. I wouldn't say it was like a failure, but it was like the biggest mistake we ever made was like improper forecasting of inventory on our hottest brand at the time. It totally destroyed the trajectory of the business. So like we sold out of like our hottest SKU for like 3 or 4 months. And we had so much momentum at the time that we were never able to regain for that brand after just selling out, having to turn off all the ads for this brand. It was,
meaning you under purchased for what?
Yeah, we under purchased like back in 20. This wasn't COVID or anything. This is like 2018, 2019. Yeah, it was like something got stuck at customs, like our big order, and we were spending a ton of money on ads. We were doing 100K a day plus in revenue, and essentially, and we actually ended up like overselling some inventory too because of this issue, because we had forecasted this thing not to get stuck at customs, right? And so like, yes, while it was still like a week away, like we were too slow to turn off ads. Like there was so much momentum. There were also subscriptions, that were active that had to get churned because of this issue. And it was just like it was easily the biggest failure we had. That, and I would say running our own fulfillment operations for 2 years.
What was the product?
This product, so it was back in the day, we had a women's activewear brand. So part of the product was like a sweat cream. It was like a thermogenic cream that you'd put on your stomach, whatever. Then you'd wear like a sweat belt over it or a sweat vest, and it would essentially help you burn fat faster. I'm sure you've seen sweat belts and sweat vests and stuff like that. So the cream was on a subscription component, the vests and the belts. And so like we had all those inventory issues, and yeah, we had a ton of influencers posting. It was the biggest financial loss that we probably had, like just slowing the revenue growth and all that stuff. So yeah, like we had offers on the table to sell that brand before this happened for like 5x what we ended up getting for it in the end. because of that
All
issue.
right.
We gotta bring him back to tell us about how he does his discovery.
100%. 100%. I wanted to ask, I have a friend of mine who he runs ads, right? And his whole thing is he's like, listen, people, if the ad delivers 3, 4, 5x, ROAS or whatever, like, doesn't everybody want that? Like, I don't understand why people wouldn't want to make all that money. And I started thinking, I was like, well, you think everybody wants to make all that money. But then I was thinking, well, but if they're selling more, that means they have to scale up the entire business. And maybe they're potentially happy, bringing in $10 million in revenue and taking out whatever, 500 grand is their salary and whatever. Have you experienced that where brands actually don't want to grow beyond a certain point? Or maybe not?
I would say yes, but for the wrong reasons. I would say like the brands, like you just mentioned a great example, like, oh, I don't want to grow because then that means more stress, more people I have to hire. I'm happy with this as a lifestyle business and the profit I'm generating right now. Like, that's never the reason where certain brands want to scale. Some brands have this like ridiculous like return on ad spend or like marketing efficiency ratio goal that they literally do not want to spend more unless they're hitting a 6x return on ad spend. And it's an arbitrary number that makes absolutely no sense. It's not based on profitability or margin or anything like that. And it's just like this fake number that they've had in mind because maybe that's what their friend is getting or their other, associate in the space. And like that, they think that's what they should be getting. It's like we've seen literally businesses, and it's not just a one-off. We've seen this a few times over the years, much less recently than it was back in the day, maybe a few years ago. But yeah, we had a brand doing like 8x, 9x return on ad spend and wanted her to scale. And she wanted to increase revenue, but she's like, I don't want you to increase spend unless you're maintaining, like an 8x. And we showed her the math. Like, we're like, if you spend 10 times more at a 1.5x, you'd be making so much more money and so much more revenue, bottom line profit, contribution margin, all that kind of stuff. Then, a 20x at your current level of spend. So like showed her the simple math and she like still didn't comprehend that. And long story short, that partnership didn't work out because like just the simple like business acumen severely lacks on some of the D2C brand owner side, which honestly is unfortunate. But I think over the past couple of years, I think they're getting more educated or have been weeded out by now to where it's not really existing. People are more savvy that are still around right now.
Gotcha. All right. So it seems that you've been, you were talking about earlier how you were kind of burning the candle on both ends, when you're doing the dentistry and you're doing the side hustle that became a massive business. I want to ask you about work-life balance. Do you believe it exists? What do you do to relax? How do you go about it?
Look at that smile.
It's a great question. I would say work-life, the way that I position it is work-life style, not work-life balance, because I don't really think you have like especially as you're building a growing business, you don't always have a constant predictable state of balance. Like, oh, I'm going to, 9 to 5, clock in, clock out, and I'm just going to grow this amazing business. Doesn't happen like that. So like when you're like in my early days, I had zero work-life balance because when you're striking something while the iron is hot, and I do believe while you're onto something that, you see there's a clear opportunity, competition will come. You're on a race against the clock before that, and you need to capitalize now. So like I was literally working around the clock. Like I said before, if I was slower to act, I would have made half the money I did, right? So then once you get beyond that, let's say like your business starts stabilizing and, you don't have that small window of opportunity and like you're still building like a nice sustainable business. You don't know as an entrepreneur when those headaches will come, when, heartache or despair, or obstacles will present themselves, when interest rates will, skyrocket overnight without any warning, right? And that work-life balance might get totally thrown out of whack and you might have to put in, or let's say one of your key employees or key clients leaves. Now it's like you need to solve problems very quickly and you don't have this balance to fall back on. Like you have to be ready. And I think like whoever you end up with as, who your spouse is needs to be understanding of this, that like, hey, this one random weekend might need to cancel our plans because this code red just happened in my business. Right. Like, so like you need to like accept that and not be kind of jaded about it, or think about like, oh, like, this problem can wait till, next week. Like sometimes that just simply is not possible. And like, you need to be ready to tackle that.
And when do you have those conversations with the loved ones, the spouses or whatever? Is that kind of beforehand? You're like, listen, the business that I'm in, there's going to be times that I'm going to have to sacrifice, and I need you to be okay with that. Like, how does that go down?
Yeah. So that should go down earlier than later. Definitely sooner than later. So yeah, like when I met my wife, I was actually still in dental school. And we actually broke up in dental school because I've always been a hard worker. And so like I was studying for my boards when we met, right? And that's like a year-long thing. Like I said, I wanted to be an orthodontist. I needed to get a certain score on the boards to live out my dream. So like didn't have enough time to keep up a relationship. And so she kind of like knew that's who she was. Then we got back together and everything. Things worked out once, I had more time to focus on personal stuff. But it's funny because she thought she was marrying a dentist. But during the Air Force, that's when we actually got married. And I remember like she literally moved. She transferred she was still in college at the time, actually. She transferred from Rutgers in New Jersey to LSU in Louisiana. And so like she moved her whole career there. And like on the weekends, she didn't know anyone there, like moved away from her friends. On the weekends, like she thought we'd be spending time together. That's when I started building this like e-commerce business and the affiliate marketing platform. It's like I literally had no time. And I was like, listen, there's a small window of opportunity. Like you just need to like get on board with this essentially, like, or this isn't good. Like this is going to happen, but it will pay off in the end. And like she just stuck through it, was very understanding of it. She even helped me on the business, like launched our first brand. We're fulfilling orders out of my garage. She was packing the orders and everything. And she always kept me in check though. She was always like, all right, you need to shut down a little bit, but she was very supportive along the way.
Did you listen?
I did. I definitely have gotten better recently than I was earlier. And, when I was building all this stuff, because, everything was happening so fast, but she's been a great help on the balancing act, but she never like draws ultimatums. Like if you don't shut down your computer by like 6 PM tonight, we're done. Like there's none of that type of stuff. Which, speaking to a lot of people in the industry, if they don't have a supportive spouse and kind of draws ultimatums and isn't understanding, then like it's either hurts the business or it hurts the relationships and they just don't work out, either on the business or personal side. But it is important to have that self-awareness, like, which my wife has done a great job at like bringing to me, is like, if you don't respond to this email on Saturday at 2 PM, like you have to think about it this way, like, will that kill a deal? Like, will it impact your business if this waits until Monday, right? Like if you're going to lose the deal because, you're not responding to this email on Saturday at 2 PM, then go ahead, deal with everything that needs to get taken care of and keep your business in a positive trajectory. But if it can wait, like you shouldn't be doing this right now. Like this is where you should be spending time in your personal life. So like, I think that was like a pretty good framework for me to start thinking about.
That's awesome. Okay. So kind of let's go into the world of inspiration. What books or media has inspired you the most?
Honestly, like books haven't really inspired me that much.
No?
I would say the one book that has impacted my life the most was The Little Book of Common Sense Investing. I think that's the name of it, by John Bogle. He was the founder of Vanguard. So like investing early on in my career, as I started making money, like right out of college, essentially, or right after dental school, I should say, really opened my eyes to like personal finance. It got me into, dollar cost averaging and, how to save money, build wealth passively. And doing like people wait 10 years, 20 years, but like time in the market is your biggest advantage. So like just getting in early, investing early. And that just opened my eyes up to like, obviously well beyond just dollar cost averaging and index funds, just how to invest in companies and, the stock market, which honestly, I tie back to everything I see on the e-commerce side, because it's all about consumer behavior and market conditions. And kind of when you merge both, you're just more powerful as a marketer too. So that was like the most impactful in my life. Never really had any like self-help books or like inspiration that like made me want to, it was really just, I don't know. I think self-motivated person. I've always been that way. Like I don't really have, like the interest to sit on the couch and watch Netflix or like just do things, like veg out. I've always been more like, I enjoy things that I'm more like engaged with. Like I'd rather be reading like someone's tweet thread about like Facebook ads, and things like that, or reading, how how to invest better, my money, or how to invest in real estate. Like that stuff, it just always really was more interesting to me.
So you went from this dentist to this marketing guy. How did you learn how to do it?
Self-study. I love studying. I love learning. And it's like one of those things. And I was actually like always a self-learner. I cannot sit in dental school, I actually rarely went to lectures, rarely, unless they're like required attendance for your grade. Because I would just rather spend that hour like reading a textbook and like thinking about it that way. I'm more of like an active learner, like thinking about it, applying it, things like that, than like sitting and like letting information wash over me. So yeah, just like I literally went through, I subscribed to like newsletters, watched YouTube videos, did Facebook Blueprint, on Memorial Day weekend when I was launching my first Facebook ads, like just learned by applying and just observing, like looking at other brands, what are they doing, and thinking about it that way. How can I apply all this information into my own?
So you don't have like a go-to person that you can kind of like run by certain business decisions or life decisions, or it's kind of all within?
It always been my brother as my partner. Like we're very similar. We're actually like polar opposites too. But like he's one of the smartest people I know, and he's always like he was more of like a kind of like a big idea guy, and I was always the executor. So it was like we would always float ideas by each other. He would have a big idea that I would think was an awful idea, and he would make me do it, and then I would figure out how to make it work. And like he would always like push me beyond my own kind of like what I thought were the limits, right? And then I would kind of keep his big ideas in check and make sure there were sound business decisions. So like, yeah, he's been like, having someone that you trust and is at the same level of like, intellect, ambition, and everything like that has been a hack for sure.
That's awesome. Keeping
the funny thing is actually, while we're talking about dentistry, he was actually about to go to dental school. He took the dental admissions test. He was going to follow my footsteps. And then like during college, like his last year of college, that's when like he started building these pages and they started taking off, and he pulled out of like the admissions process because his Instagram pages started growing and he started like, started making money. And yeah, so like he was the entrepreneurial guy, like curious guy that like saw this very early and like pulled me into it essentially.
So what's the balance now between you and your brother? You guys are both partners in this massive business. How do you delegate? How do you split responsibility?
Yeah, so I mean, since we were acquired like a little over a year ago, he actually isn't with the business anymore. So he's taking time off.
Well, do you want to tell us about that for 2 seconds?
Yeah, so yeah, we were acquired in February of last year, 2023. And yeah, he still has his other business, Wrap. He's actually not even active in that business anymore. He's taken kind of the past year off to travel, and because since he got out of college, he spent the past decade just grinding as an entrepreneur, building brands, he had that Wrap business still. It's a media business. So he had never really taken the true time off to travel. So he's taken a year off to just kind of do his own thing. He's still involved in the business loosely, definitely not on a day-to-day. But he checks in from time to time. We still talk every day on, he's sending me inspo, like, here's a great ad I saw, here's a great idea. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?
So let's rewind.
Yeah.
Let's rewind. I don't know, 5 years, a little less, 2 years. What did that look like? The partnership between you and your brother?
You mean like pre-acquisition?
Yeah.
Or post-acquisition? Pre-acquisition, yeah, we were still obviously he was still full-time on the business. We were partners, and we had this great opportunity that came around to essentially go into this acquisition with a great South Florida guy that kind of was nearby and had done it on a big scale with other agencies in the past. So a little backstory on him and the opportunity. So he sold his first agency for $500 million, 500 mil, to Hearst Magazine. And then he did it a second time. He's built and sold another 9-figure agency. And he had kind of been on the sidelines and then approached us a couple of years ago wanting to do this a third time, another agency roll-up essentially. And so like we were basically the first agency he was going to acquire. There was no business that acquired us. It was him building a business using us as the foundation. And, it was a great opportunity for us. And so at that point in time, it was a good, at this point too, Dan was also like, I don't want to say burning out, but like he was like not focusing and as ambitious as he was, 5 years ago, right? He was kind of like, yeah, I need some time off, right? So it was the perfect opportunity for him to kind of step away. And I had a new partner now, with this acquisition coming in, and we acquired 2 other agencies in this, very shortly after we got acquired. So like now we had other partners coming in to help really grow the business to the next level. But obviously, like, I don't want to say losing him as a partner has been a challenge, but like not having him on the day to day has it's definitely been a challenge in a sense, because like he's always been that like confidant and like person that like you always have that person that you trust, right? Like that you can go to and give them like half of your workload to go figure out and do it, right? Like having that and stepping in with new partners is, obviously it takes time to build trust and understand what their strengths, limitations are. It's like having a new partner essentially, right? So, but yeah, I mean, he's still very much in tune with the business. He still has a ton of equity in the business. So like he's very much invested in what we're building and still involved, like I said, just not on that day to day. I'm happy for him. He's got time off now.
Nice. So I got two more questions, and then I think we're going to wrap it up. So the first question is, what piece of advice would you give to brands that are just starting out?
The biggest piece of advice I can give is like you need to be a student of e-commerce. Like, I'm assuming this is a brand like a D2C native or D2C led brand, right? Like you need to be a student of e-commerce. If you don't understand finance, you don't understand marketing and KPIs and metrics and your margins, you might as well not even start the brand, right? So that's my biggest piece of advice: is follow the right people on Twitter, follow the right people on LinkedIn, follow.
Okay. How do you identify the right people? Because everybody and their mother is telling you how to do it. I know in the world of sales, I looked at everybody, the most aggressive type to the most kind of chill and everything in between, to try to find, what potentially works for me. But how does a person go about that?
I would say reach out to me and I'll give you a few names that you should follow. But
follow
I mean,
Jon Snow.
Yeah, there's many more beyond me that can give you a ton of extra information as well. But I would say just like browse around. Like you can tell like, who's a real player on LinkedIn and Twitter by just the level of intellect they inject into their content. If it's tactical and there's reasoning behind it and they're not selling you something overtly with that post, like, like, and I would say formulating your own thoughts. It's never like taking one person's word as God's truth. Like find as many people with differing opinions and think about it and apply them to your own business essentially. And like think about it in the way that you think makes sense. So it's just like these people give you information on like a framework of how they think about things. Like you need to use those different opinions to formulate your own essentially. So
okay, great.
Yep. And then there's YouTube videos, right? There's YouTube courses, there's Facebook Blueprint, there's so much information. Google, the power of Google. If you like, that's what I do. If I don't know something, I Google it, I learn, go through a bunch of different rabbit holes, figure out. Anytime you don't know an answer to a question, you need to go find that answer then and there, even if it takes you hours. Like you need to learn something essentially every day. Never let these things build up. So that's the biggest piece of advice. And build out your network. I have so many different group chats I'm in with other people that are agency owners. So like if I have questions about agency ownership, scaling an agency, ask them their opinion on a certain challenge I might be facing at that time. If you're a brand owner, get in touch with other brand owners that are, at your revenue or like, stage in the brand's life cycle. Get people at the level of where you want to be going, right? Like, so surround yourself with the right people that you can bounce ideas off of at any given point in time. That's critically important.
Okay. So that's amazing. So the last one is, what piece of advice would you give to an established brand to move to the next level? I've heard that there are brands that are stuck at 7 figures or they're stuck at 8 figures and like they just can't move to the next, or they're stuck at 3 figures.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but they're established. They've been doing this for years and years and years. How do they break out and up to the next level?
They need to ask themselves why. Like what is the reason why they haven't grown? Is it their product margins aren't good enough? Is that their target market is too small? Is it that, they're only focused on one channel and they haven't tried other channels? Like what is the issue? Itemize them and then build solutions around them. And, as you go through that problem list of what's holding you back, like, and you're trying to build solutions, that's your best way of trying to unlock new growth. right? So like if you know that you have a customer acquisition problem and you don't know why, it's like either get a consultant to come in, book some like mentor calls or whatever it may be that can come in and give you ideas and open your eyes, or you might just need to hire someone, that is better at doing certain things that are holding you back. So it's just being crazy honest with yourself, I think, is critically important.
It's interesting you say that because I know in the startup world, oftentimes, the person who founded the company becomes like the CEO or president, and they build it to a certain point. And then after they reach 100 employees or 500, all of a sudden they start falling apart. And we see like other investors or something who's like, I think it's time. You need to bring somebody else. Not everybody is a Mark Zuckerberg,
Exactly.
who can kind of just take it from 0 to a gazillion.
Yeah, 90% of people are not, capable. The person, and the same thing can actually be said for employees. Like the person you had from day one is probably not going to be the same person you need on day 1000 after your brand is now, a 7 or 8 figure revenue brand, right? Like maybe I'm not saying you have to get rid of them, but like they might not be the person to lead that discipline, as they were from day 0, right? Like they may be they might need to report to someone that can get them to the next level, right? So having those transparent conversations with yourself or with your employees is always important. You always just need to be honest to yourself, right? Like if someone's not right for the job now as they were 2 years ago, like that's just the fact of the situation. You always need to put the business first.
All right. Amazing. All right, John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. John, where can they find you?
Yeah, Twitter and LinkedIn. Don't even know what my handles are. At Twitter, it's at Dr. Jonathan Snow. LinkedIn, I think it's at Dr. John Snow. And then my newsletter, of course. Like I launched my newsletter, weekly newsletter, a couple months ago. Launched it, and weekly insights on D2C.
What's the name of the newsletter again?
In the Snow.
In the Snow.
So In the Snow newsletter. Yep. Yeah, weekly insights delivered, industry trends. I've been really focusing on social commerce and TikTok shop, since I think that's where all the energy and the unknowns are right now. So yeah, follow along and get in touch with me whenever. Reach out if you want to schedule some time. Happy to chat with anyone.
Links in the comments.
There you
go.
go.
We're gonna have to remember that one. Thank you. All right. So if anybody has any questions,
that call to action on Instagram. It'll nuke your reach.
There you go.
Yeah.
Unless we'll sponsor it together and you could be our influencer.
Yeah, we can run ads behind it. Yeah.
Just straight up ads. All right. So if you have any questions for John, obviously reach out to him. If you want to reach out to us here at the Grow with the Flow podcast, you can reach out to me, Dove Karp, or Dave Silverman on LinkedIn or wherever you find us online. And until next time, we'll catch you later.
Thanks a lot, guys.